The furniture from the Spanish Renaissance is rectilinear in form and simple in design and construction. There are few moldings or architectural details. The overall scale of the furniture is heavier than the Italian and the French Renaissance styles. Some of the ornamentation that we will see on the furniture shows Moorish and classical influence. A few characteristics that help us to identify this furniture style from the Spanish Renaissance is that we have iron applied to some of the furniture pieces. The iron that we will see could be an applied ornamentation on the facade of a furniture piece, or we can see it sometimes in the lock mechanisms for storage pieces. Walnut is the main wood that's used, but they also bring in exotic woods for some of the luxurious pieces. The decoration that we will see for furniture can be inlaid, carving, painting, or gilding, and then also they bring in silver from the New World and use that as applied decoration on furniture. A few characteristics of the decorative arts is that we will see leather-covered chests or boxes. And this is a Moorish legacy along with some of the cushions that are trimmed with braid, cord, or tassels. So we will see the influence of using upholstery on furniture items that we saw in the Italian Renaissance, but we will see those hints of Spanish Renaissance in the use of braid and cording and tassels. So to summarize, the furniture and decorative arts from the Spanish Renaissance will appear heavier, be rectilinear in form. We will see some carving. Some of that carving will be a Moorish or Gothic influence. We will see the introduction of leather to cover chests or boxes, but also sometimes in seating also. And we also see cushions that are trimmed with braid, cord, and tassels. Here we're seeing the Gothic influence on this oak box chair. The Gothic style was introduced into Spain during the 13th century. And we see some of the motifs from the Gothic style applied to furniture items during this time. So on this oak box chair, we're seeing the Gothic arch here. We're also seeing the carving and ornamentation on the piece as showing the tracery that we would see in windows on Gothic churches. The oak box chair on the right is showing linen fold paneling at the bottom. It's also showing hints of the Moorish or Islamic influence where we see that all over geometric pattern applied to the back of the oak box chair. On these chests we're seeing panel and frame construction, and we're also seeing some Gothic motifs. On the upper left we're seeing the linen fold paneling, but you can see the iron that is used for the lock mechanism. On the bottom right, we're seeing the Mudéjar style of architecture and some of those motifs applied to the facade of this panel and frame chest, mixed with Moorish and Gothic motifs also. So we're seeing the Gothic arch, but we're also seeing that application of all over surface decoration in geometric forms. In this beautiful Plateresque style wardrobe, we're seeing the application of all over low relief surface ornamentation and carving. And remember that the purpose and the impact of the Plateresque style was that the all-over carving was the focus, and we see that being applied to furniture also. The image on the left is showing a 12th century boxwood folding X-form stool. We can see that it has simple carving on both sides, and then we also see that it is finished with an animal paw. On the right, we're seeing more traditional Spanish Renaissance style stools, and that we have the four-legged stools connected with stretchers, but there's very little carving or ornamentation applied to the stools. We can just see that they're usually using that simple turning design to create the overall style for the piece. Notice also on some of these stools that there's an opening in the top, and that would be so that it could be easily moved around, so there's that handhold area. This is a Sillón de caderas. A sillón is an armchair, When we start to study these styles, when we move into Spanish Renaissance and French Renaissance, you will have to identify the furniture pieces by their Spanish or French names. So make sure you make note of that. Identifying this as an armchair would not be the correct terminology. So we are calling this the Sillón, which is an armchair. Decorative means hip joint chair or X-form chair in Spanish. But this is actually showing a curule form, and you know that from studying the previous styles. This is showing that double U form. This particular piece is very richly ornamented with very minute geometric inlay of ivory, bone, and also some other exotic woods. What's unique about this chair is the curule form, but also that it has these stretchers that run from the front to the back. The seat and back panels are made out of leather, and oftentimes the Sillón de Caderas is foldable so that it can be pushed together to be able to be moved very easily. In these Sillón chairs, you're noticing that the overall shape of the chair is very rectilinear in form. We also see a few other elements that I wanted to point out, just briefly discussing, some of the concepts that we talk about when we look at Spanish Renaissance furniture. And that this piece, there is very little carving. We just have very smooth surfaces and then turning on the legs. As far as the upholstery, we notice that we have fringe around the seat rail here. So that is another way to help you identify the Spanish Renaissance furniture style. Also in Spanish Renaissance, we will see nail heads. Nail heads are used as structural support, but also they can be used to attach a material to the wood support of the chair. So nail heads are another important identifying feature of the Spanish Renaissance. When we think of nail heads today and how they're applied to furniture pieces, it's usually just a very decorative, simple design. So very similar to this circular design here. But I wanted to show you on the image on the right how detailed many of these nail head designs could be during the Spanish Renaissance. And you can see some of the, I think, the Gothic influence in the nail head designs, and then just the simple classical designs also. This is a Sillón de Fraileros. This would be an armchair for a religious friar or monk. The form is most often seen in a collapsible chair form. So we're seeing, I'm showing you kind of it's starting to bend on the right and then folded out fully on the left. It will have a fabric or sometimes a leather seat. You can see that this particular piece highlights the fringe area in the back along with nail heads and braiding at the top. It will usually have a broader hinged front and back stretcher too, so we can see that it's a little bit wider than a normal armchair. Here are a few examples of the Sillón de Fraileros from the late Spanish Renaissance. Notice the front stretcher piece and how it is very close to the seat. We also have fringing around the seat rail and then also at the lower part of the back. Notice the nail head design that helps attach the upholstery to the style. And then we also see in this piece up here on the right, we see this delicate inlay added to the overall design of the piece, and then the fringing on the back. One thing that I want you to notice with the arm style is notice on the Sillón de Fraileros, the arm style usually curves down, and that is so someone could easily grip the armchair, the arm part of the chair to get out of the chair. But also notice the wider seat on most of these pieces, and that will help us to identify the Sillón de Fraileros from regular armchairs. This is the Catalunya chair, which is a very important chair from the Spanish Renaissance style. There's a few distinguishing characteristics that will help you to identify the Catalunya chair. It has a very tall back, and those back pieces are separated into 3 cross pieces, and the top is usually arched and elaborately decorated. So that's one way to identify it. Also, the legs have both turned and flat stretchers. So what I mean by that are that the legs are turned. Here we have multiple stretchers. Some of them are turned and then some of them are flat and may have a simple carving in the center. Usually the Catalunya chairs are designed as a set. So that here we're seeing a set of 8 of exactly the same chair. But you notice that many of the Catalonia chairs have very different designs, so they will all be very uniquely designed. And sometimes we will see them brightly painted in red, green, or ivory, and some will also have partial gilding. This chair was named after the Catalonia region, which is in northeastern Spain. This is the Portuguese chair. The style of the chair is very rectilinear in form. It has a tall back and it is an armchair. It has brass finials that end on the stile. So you can see here is the stile here, and then it ends with a very small brass finial at the top. The turning on the legs, the post, and the stretchers is very elaborate. So we can see, especially on the stretchers, that the turning is a lot more, we're seeing a lot more turning than we did on previous chairs. Also, it's very ornately carved, and notice the very broad front stretcher at the front here. Notice the very delicate scrolled arms. And then also notice what we call quadrimicile, which is embossed leather, and it's applied to the seat of the chair and the back of the chair. And what they do to create the quadrimicile is that they design and etch into wood blocks, and then they press those wood blocks onto the tanned leather, and that gives that embossed look on the leather. And so you can see that the design is almost very similar to Plateresque style in that it is very low relief. Here are 2 other examples of the Portuguese chair. You can see the armchair on the left has that low relief embossed leather. And then I wanted to show you an example of a side chair in the Portuguese chair style. But I really wanted to point out in this slide is the Spanish foot. The Spanish foot is an important design characteristic from the Spanish Renaissance. The Spanish foot will start off with an inward turning scroll, and then it will move up and will have vertical grooves above that scroll. The overall design of the Spanish foot is very simple and graceful. You remember the settle from when we studied the Middle Ages. This is an example of a settle from the Spanish Renaissance in the Plateresque style. Here we're seeing Spanish Renaissance tables, and this is where we first start to see those iron underbrace supports. So you can see those here underneath the table. And although the table has a very solid, heavy form, I think the simple bracing and using iron to form that structural support makes the table appear lighter. But you'll notice that we have heavy turning on the table legs in this trestle style support. But instead of the solid piece that we would see in medieval times on the trestle style support, so this piece being solid, in the Spanish Renaissance it almost appears as just 4 simple legs, so it does have a lighter appearance. And remember the refectory tables from the Middle Ages and the trestle supports. Again, they were solid forms. In the Spanish Renaissance style, we still have these sets of trestle supports, especially in these very long refectory tables, but they are set up differently into where this space is open. And then often you will have wrought iron underbracing support to help support the center part between the trestles. The Vargueño is the most important Spanish furniture piece. It was designed to hold documents and valuables. It is usually in the shape of a trunk with handles, and it has a fall front, so it's very similar to a fall front desk. The interior and the exterior usually have beautiful ornamentation. We will also see a single locking plate on that fall front to help secure many of those valuables. The Vargueño is this piece right here. It's sitting on top of a pied de puente, which I'll show you in the next slide. The pied de puente is specifically designed to support the Vargueño. It has loopers, and those loopers pull out here, and they support that fall front desk. And so here is the close-up view of the looper. In the bottom, you will have 3 columns trestle supports with a highly carved arcaded stretcher. So here is our trestle support, and then this area is usually heavily carved. Here are a few other examples of the Vargueños with the pied de puente at the bottom. And you can see that we have the trestle support on both ends of the pied de puente, and then we also have that, it almost looks like an arcade at the bottom, supporting that, connecting those 2 trestle supports together. And then on these particular Vargueños, I wanted to show you how elaborate the detail and carving can be on the front, and then also how it can be mixed with different iron and inlay. Now this is another type of support for the Vargueño, which is a taquillon. A taquillon is separated into 4 equal compartments. So we can see 2 drawers above and 2 drawers below, and it usually will have a geometric design. This also shows you the loopers and how they are built into the carcass of the piece. And here's another example of a Vargueño with the taquillon. And I just love this piece because it shows you, when you open that fall front desk, the very intricate detailing. And I also think it's very beautiful how they contrasted the iron with the different inlay and the darker wood. But notice at the bottom of the taquillon how it has those 4 separate compartments for storage. Here we're seeing a Spanish Renaissance cupboard, and we see carved doors in a geometric pattern, and then spindles in the upper portion, and then we also have some carved areas here on the vertical perimeter of the piece so that we can see that that also helps to frame the overall design. And here are a few other just exquisite walnut cupboards from the Spanish Renaissance, and they almost seem to be very modern for that time period because of this sharp geometric designs. When we look at Spanish Renaissance style beds, we will often see 4-poster beds, and they will have what we call spiral turning. This is an example of that spiral turning. You can see it is going in a spiral form. They would often also have extensive carving on the headboard, and then a fabric tester would be pulled back during the day and closed at night. Here on this bed, we're seeing the mixture of that spiral turning using wood, and then there's a very elaborate Brown's bedstead. A bedstead is the framework of a bed where the mattress is placed. So very similar, like this structure is very similar to the headboard of a bed. Notice in other parts of the room, we have the Sillón de Fraileros and the Papelera. The Papelera is a cabinet that's very similar to a Vargueño, but it doesn't have that drop front or a permanent style base. And finally, I want to end with wrought iron. I know I mentioned this in the beginning. We saw the application of wrought iron on furniture pieces, but we also saw it a lot in lighting, especially later on. And it is just a very important, it's an integral part of the Spanish style. So if you are commissioned to design a space using the Spanish style, or a space that is influenced by the Spanish style, wrought iron would be an important part to include in your design. We see it on railings, lamps, grills, so we could see it on the front of a fireplace, and then we could also see it applied to many furniture forms. So that ends our lecture on Spanish Renaissance. Make sure that you take a lot of time with the Spanish Renaissance style to understand the key characteristics of the style, but also that you understand and can use the Spanish terminology to identify those key characteristics and furniture forms.